Hello everyone. In this third video on the third secret of the Vatican, we are moving away from the historical and prophetic context of the secret to delve into its content as much as we can know. And we will see that this content might very well announce the apocalypse for a time close to ours. We have already seen in the other videos of this series that the true, in quotes, third secret of the Vatican was linked to the Great Apostasy at the top of the Catholic Church and in the rest of society. The massive de-Christianization of society began in the West from the end of the 19th century and even more so after May 68. It confirms the prophecy about the Great Apostasy as a harbinger of the end times in Christian tradition. The highly controversial Second Vatican Council is unanimously presented as the 1789 of the Catholic Church, that is to say, as a revolution. And it coincided with this great apostasy that culminated in and from the period of May 68. It is therefore the cause, or one of the possible causes, of the acceleration of the de-Christianization of the West. More than the theological content of the Council, what is problematic is probably, or also, its manipulation by enemies of the Church infiltrated in the Vatican. Finally, the refusal of several popes to reveal the third secret of the Vatican is suspicious. One must still dare to allow oneself to scorn the request of the Holy Virgin. This suggests that this secret announced something very embarrassing for the Vatican, namely the great apostasy of a part of the Vatican itself. Some people have been able to read the third secret of the Vatican or gather information about it. They have not really revealed the secret since they did not have the right to do so. But they revealed that, according to the third secret, the great apostasy in the Church would begin at the top of the Church in connection with the events of the apocalypse. There has been a lot of disinformation and pressure around the actors of the third secret of the Vatican, and notably around the seer of the apparition, Sister Lucia dos Santos. She was the one tasked with revealing the secret at the time chosen by Our Lady. There were also pressures around the popes and cardinals who knew the secret. Among the people who made revelations about the secret and are credible, we can mention Malachi Martin. Malachi Martin was the private secretary of the powerful Cardinal Bey at the time when Pope John XXIII read the third secret. Priest, professor and scholar, biblical scholar, essayist and novelist, Malachi Martin also worked directly during his career for Popes John XXIII and Paul VI. He died in 1999 after writing several books and giving numerous lectures. One of his favored topics was the third secret of the Vatican. He was the witness and reporter of the revelations made by John Paul II in a private, restricted circle. Subsequently, Malachi Martin left the Jesuit order. He chose to keep his vow of celibacy, but he was released from his vows of obedience and poverty. His word is credible because he was a man who held high positions in the Church. Thanks to this, he was able to access sensitive information, except that afterwards he was able to speak freely because he was no longer bound by the vow of obedience. In summary, and to put it simply, Malachi Martin claims that the popes actually have very little power and that they are completely controlled and stifled by a sort of deep state within the Catholic Church, a Vatican deep state. According to him, Pope John Paul VI was no exception to the rule. He was hindered by this power, deep from asking, in 1989, the bishops worldwide for a very particular prayer intention. It was within the framework of reciting the Rosary once a week. And the prayer intention was for the third secret of the Vatican not to be implemented. According to Malachi Martin, John Paul II, restrained by the deep power of the Vatican, feared being assassinated and replaced by a false pope if he openly rebelled. John Paul II would have then refrained from mentioning the third secret, but he had previously made bits of revelation to German bishops. This was during a meeting in the city of Fulda in November 1980, in Germany, therefore. Malachi Martin claims to have attended this exchange, during which the German bishops asked several questions about the Vatican's secret to Pope John Paul II. The Pope is said to have agreed to answer them, but in cautious terms. Malachi Martin's testimony is confirmed and supplemented by an article recounting the exchange. The article appeared shortly afterward in the magazine of a German association called Stimme des Glaubens. According to Malachi Martin, Pope John Paul II supposedly said to the audience, "Suppose I tell you that Florida will be engulfed by water, that there will be 3 days of darkness, and that an entire nation will be annihilated, completely annihilated, and that the sun will be darkened for 5 days, and that most of the earth will be affected by an epidemic that they can neither cure nor live with." And he said, "Suppose, while all the dormant volcanoes awaken, what would you call that? Sensational. So, what's the point of telling you?" To the bishops who asked what should be done, the Pope replied, "Say the rosary. It is your only protection." To the bishops who ask him why he doesn't publish the secret now, he replies, "Because it would give the Soviets an advantage over the West that we could not counter." According to Malachi Martin, we know that the third secret is also related to a conflict with Russia. He talks about it in one of his books, The House Battered by the Winds. He will also mention in an interview the involvement of Ukraine. I quote him, "Very important if one believes in the revelations of Our Lady of the Vatican, the salvation of the world, the healing of all these ills will begin in Ukraine and in Russia." This is why the Virgin had spoken so much about Russia, which was to be the first to be healed of its errors, as it would then allow the rest of the world to improve and heal from its sins. It is a very mysterious message, as one might have thought that, according to us, Westerners, the salvation of the world would come from the West. But no, according to the Vatican, our salvation will come from the East, and particularly from Russia and Ukraine, which is extraordinary in itself. Malachi Martin also revealed in 1997 that the sign of the Virgin in the sky announcing the apocalypse would occur in 10 or 20 years. It indeed happened in 2017. This is what we saw in another video about prophecies and the apocalypse calendar, with the exceptional astronomical sign of September 23, 2017. It is an astronomical configuration that fulfilled the sign described by the Apostle St. John in the book of Revelation. In chapter 12, this is commonly referred to as the sign of the woman of Revelation 12. Sister Lucia of Our Saint, the seer of the apparition of Our Lady of Vatican, is also said to have revealed to a sister of her convent that the third secret concerned the chapters 8 to 13 of the book of Revelation by St. John. Is this testimony reliable or not? It's difficult to know. But in any case, what Pope John Paul II said about the third secret of Vatican aligns with certain plagues described by St. John in Revelation. The third secret is linked to the Great Apostasy that characterizes our era, and the Great Apostasy is foretold by Revelation. Malachi Martin says that the third secret is linked to Ukraine and Russia, and we are currently experiencing a conflict between Ukraine and Russia. So, everything indicates that the third secret of the Vatican foretells the apocalypse for a time that seems to be ours. Now we will see how. The death of Benedict XVI in 2023 could very well mark the arrival of the White Rider and the opening of the 7 seals of the apocalypse. The events of the apocalypse begin with the opening of the 4 seals of a book by our Lord Jesus Christ. Each of these 4 seals releases a rider who brings plagues upon humanity. The first of these riders is a rider who rides a white horse. He comes as a conqueror and to achieve victory, according to the text of St. John. This rider is reminiscent of the Pope simply because the Pope's attire is white and the color white is a symbol of spirituality. But also because, in his second letter to the Thessalonians, chapter 2, verses 1 to 17, St. Paul warns that the Antichrist may arise when those who restrain him and the one who restrains him are removed. Those who restrain him can be interpreted either as the Holy Spirit, or more likely as the Catholic Church, as an institution founded by Jesus Christ, the Church as the cornerstone of the Christian faith. And the term, the one who restrains him, is generally interpreted as referring to the Pope of this Church, because the Pope has been designated by Christ as his representative on earth. If the office of the Pope is abolished, the forces of evil under the authority of Satan and the Antichrist can then be unleashed. This role of the Pope has been enshrined in the Church's doctrine since the First Vatican Council in 1870. It is in the Constitution, Pastor Eternus, that the dogma of the perpetual successors of Peter was affirmed. Through this dogma, Peter, the first pope of Christianity, will have successors until the end of time. Or more precisely, what is affirmed in Pastor Eternus and translated as the perpetual succession of Peter until the end of time is the jurisdictional primacy of the Pope over the Church of God. This primacy was given to him by Jesus Christ for the eternal salvation and perpetual well-being of the Church. It is the role of the Pope, with his spiritual authority for defining the salvation of souls, that is permanent. The Church has already experienced about 40 anti-popes in its history, that is, popes whose office it later repudiated because it considered their election to have been irregular. This is particularly the case with the popes who reigned in Avignon, in rivalry with those in Rome during the Great Western Schism. But in these cases of contested elections, what was at stake were solely rivalries between men, rivalries between the claimants to the papal office, and rivalries between the kings who supported them. There was no end of times during these reigns of antipopes, because the papal function and its spiritual authority to serve as a bulwark against heresies were not called into question. That is why the end of times did not occur. But the case of Benedict XVI's resignation is particular, as we will demonstrate. If Benedict XV resigned, it was due to the pressure exerted within the Vatican and in connection with political leaders of Freemasonry. The resignation of Benedict XVI is the culmination of a longer-term work of destruction by Freemasonry. This is the creation of Satan, and it is obviously the fierce enemy of Catholicism for its highest-ranking members. Because Freemasonry has undermined the foundations of the Catholic Church from within. We can say that this is a sign of the end times. The death of Benedict XVI, the last legitimately elected pope, is then the end of this process and the trigger for the next stage. The next stage is the withdrawal of the Holy Spirit, allowing the coming of the Antichrist for the apocalypse in a period that is supposed to last 7 years. The last legitimate pope, as long as he was alive, was Benedict XVI, because he is the last legitimately elected pope. His resignation was not valid because it was forced upon him, but he ensured that his renunciation did not comply with canonical rights. Benedict XVI found himself in the position known as an impeded pope, meaning he was prevented from exercising his ministry since his resignation was forced. It was caused by a political coup decided by the American Democrats and executed by the European Union. This coup d'état had been prepared since the time of Pope John Paul II by the Vatican Freemasonry. This coup d'état at the Vatican was intended to replace Benedict XVI with a more progressive pope. It is undeniable, proven by perfectly official media sources, that Benedict XVI was living under significant pressure at the time of his resignation. About a year earlier, the Vatican scandal began to splash the Vatican. The Vatican leaks are a series of official document leaks carried out by the Pope's butler, which revealed cases of corruption and favoritism in the city. According to an investigation by an Italian newspaper, the Vatican leaks also revealed a blackmail affair, a sort of gay lobby against priests and lay people in the city. But above all, just 1 month before the announcement of his resignation by Benedict XVI on February 11, 2013, access to the Vatican Bank's SWIFT banking system had been blocked. The pretext was that the Holy See had not applied the European Union's best practice rules for combating money laundering. At the request of the European Commission, the Bank of Italy had ordered the Italian branch of Deutsche Bank, which manages the Vatican's card payments, to deactivate the payment terminals installed on the territory of the Holy See. It was no longer possible to pay by credit card in Vatican City in January 2013. Just after this untenable situation, Benedict XVI then resigned, officially due to severe migraines. But how could a forced resignation be valid in the eyes of God? For the renunciation of his office to be valid, a pope must pronounce it in accordance with the Code of Canon Law, according to Canon 332, paragraph 2 to be precise. He must explicitly express in writing and in Latin that he specifically renounces being pope, the papal office, the patrinimunus in Latin, and not just the ministry, the ministerium. However, Benedict XVI did not say that he was renouncing the papal office. He did not even say that he was freely renouncing the ministry. He just announced that from March 1st, 2013, the ministry would be taken from him. That sounds much more like a declaration of an impeded seat, thank you, than a consensual renunciation. The distinction between the papal office and the papal ministry allowed Benedict XVI to invalidate his renunciation in the eyes of God. The distinction was introduced in 1983 by Pope John Paul II. He had made it precisely to protect himself and his successors against a forced resignation he feared. And he made it the same year he received a report on the infiltration of Freemasonry in the Vatican, following a long investigation. This investigation had been commissioned in the last years of Pope Paul VI's reign, in the 1970s, to Bishop Stéphane Gagnon. Information about this investigation had been leaked by someone close to the author. From this report, Bishop Don Charles Temure, who wrote a book titled The Winning Investigation. The book notably revealed that among the Freemasons within the Curia was a cardinal who was also the prefect of the Congregation for Bishops. In this capacity, he played an influential role in the appointment of cardinals. Another prominent Freemason was the cardinal who had been the architect of the liturgical revolution of the Second Vatican Council, Archbishop Bonini, as we have already seen. The infiltration of Freemasonry in the Vatican was therefore not a marginal phenomenon without consequences. Ultimately, the election of Pope Francis in 2013 was invalid, and the last legitimate pope was Benedict XVI. However, Benedict XVI passed away on December 31, 2022, and his funeral took place on January 5, 2023. We have seen that his passing is supposed to release the Antichrist and subsequently lead to the apocalypse. Therefore, the period of the apocalypse would begin from 2023. In several videos about prophecies announcing a return of Jesus Christ starting from 2030 and on a possible timeline of the apocalypse, we also point to the year 2023. 2023 as the beginning of the 7-year period of tribulation, in other words, 7 years of trial, for the Jews before they finally recognize Jesus Christ as the Messiah in 2030. If this analysis is correct, the attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, marked the beginning of the end times events. The illegitimate Pope Francis thus resembles the rider on the white horse in the apocalypse. He would have been released following the death of Benedict XVI. Whether one likes Pope Francis or not, what matters is the integrity of the papal office. As an anecdote, the election of Pope Francis took place on March 13, 2013, yet another day starting with 13. The sum of the digits of the date March 13, 2013, 13/03/2013 equals 13/1303/2013. This is yet another sign of bad omen. Moreover, Pope Francis is the 6th Pope in office since the preparation of the highly controversial Second Vatican Council. Before him, there were John XXIII, Paul VI, John Paul I, John Paul II, and Benedict XVI. The number 6 symbolizes man, and the number 7 symbolizes divine perfection in the Bible. The 7th Pope might therefore symbolize a new era, a renewal of Christianity. We will now conclude this series of videos by focusing on the fate of Christians during the apocalypse. What will happen to us at that time? When will we know? What can we guess or assume? Can we protect ourselves? This is the subject of the next video in this series, dedicated to the connection between the apocalypse and the third secret of the Vatican. Thank you for listening to me. Feel free to like, share this information, and why not join us in the non-virtual world? Have a good day, and may God bless you.